Most daughters bring a bottle of wine to a housewarming party. I brought a velvet-bound book filled with bank statements. Marlene stood in her renovated living room, toasting to fresh starts, beaming like she hadn't just siphoned $50,000 from my life savings to pay for the hardwood floors beneath her feet. She thought I was there to celebrate her new chapter, but I was actually there to close the book on her lies. Harbor Glen was a city of damp gray mornings and salt that ate through the undercarriages of parked cars. It was a place where people worked hard to hold on to things that were constantly trying to rust away. I fit in perfectly here. I was 33 years old, a project manager for a logistics firm near the docks, and my entire life was built on the architecture of redundancy. I had a plan A, a plan B, and a catastrophic failure protocol for everything from my radiator blowing to my career imploding. I sat in my car outside the hospital, the engine idling, watching the fog roll in off the Atlantic. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, gripping at 10 and 2 until my knuckles turned the color of old ivory. I took a breath, held it for 4 counts, and released it for 4. It was a technique I used when a shipment got stuck in customs or when a contractor tried to double bill for materials. It was also the technique I used whenever I had to deal with my family. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, a notification from my savings app. It was automatic, a programmed transfer of $500 moving from my checking to my high-yield savings account. I allowed myself a microscopic smile. That money was the brick and mortar of my future. For 7 years, I had been funneling away 30% of my paycheck, living in a studio apartment that smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and neighbors' cigarettes, driving a sedan with 180,000 miles on it, all for one singular purpose. I was buying a townhouse, not renting, buying. I had the pre-approval letter in my glove compartment. I had the down payment sitting in an account that I checked every morning like a religious text. I was safe. I had built a wall of money between me and the chaos I grew up in, and nobody was going to breach it. I killed the engine and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the patient discharge wing. The air smelled of iodine and floor wax. My father, Grant Reed, was sitting in a wheelchair by the curb, looking smaller than I remembered. He was 62, but he looked 70. His skin was the color of parchment, and his usually neat silver hair was matted on one side from the hospital pillow. Standing next to him, vibrating with a frantic, performative energy, was Marlene. My stepmother was a woman who treated life like a stage play where she was permanently cast as the tragic but glamorous heroine. She was wearing a beige cashmere cardigan that I knew cost more than my car insurance deductible, and she was currently berating a nurse while smiling wide enough to show her back molars. "Lila, thank God," she said as I approached. Her voice was a melodic chime that set my teeth on edge. "They have been keeping us waiting for 20 minutes. Your father is exhausted. Look at him." I looked at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his knees, his hands trembling slightly in his lap. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. I put a hand on his shoulder. The fabric of his windbreaker felt thin. "Ready to go home?" "Home," he whispered, as if the word was a question he didn't know the answer to. Marlene swooped in, physically interposing herself between us to adjust his collar. "Of course he is ready. It has been a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. The doctors are incompetent. I had to demand they check his electrolytes 3 times. 3 times. Lila, if I hadn't been here, I don't know what would have happened. She always did this. She narrated reality as it happened, editing the footage to ensure she was the savior. The reality was that Dad had collapsed at the hardware store 3 days ago. Unmanaged high blood pressure, exhaustion, and dehydration. A cocktail of neglect that shouldn't happen to a man with a wife who didn't work and claimed to manage the household. We got him into the car. I drove. Marlene sat in the back with him, cooing and fussing, while I navigated the slick streets of Harbor Glen. "Lila," Marlene said, leaning forward between the seats, "I need you to stop by the house for a few hours this week. Maybe stay for dinner tonight? I have work. Marlene, we have a compliance audit coming up." She sighed, a loud, tragic exhalation. "I know. You are always so busy with your career, but I am drowning. The paperwork from this hospital stay is already piling up. And honestly, with your father like this, I can't look at a spreadsheet without getting a migraine. You are so good with that stuff. The organization, the numbers, it's your gift. It wasn't a gift. It was a survival mechanism I developed because they were so bad at it. Just for a few weeks. She pressed, just until he is back on his feet. Log into the accounts, pay the utilities, keep things organized. I don't want the lights getting turned off because I missed an email while I was making sure your father didn't have a stroke. I looked at Dad in the rearview mirror. He was asleep, his mouth slightly open. Fine, I said. I will come over tonight and sort the immediate bills. And, Marlene added, her voice dropping to a casual, breezy frequency, we might need you to handle the pharmacy copays and maybe the ambulance fee for now. Just until the insurance reimburses us, the cash flow is a little tight with the transition. Transition? I asked. What transition? She waved a hand dismissively. Just shifting assets, banking stuff, boring. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. My assets didn't shift. They sat in allocated buckets and grew interest. But I didn't push. Not with Dad looking so fragile. We arrived at their rental, a duplex on the south side of town that they had been living in for 3 years. It was cluttered with Marlene's attempts at elegance. Oversized vases, velvet throw pillows that collected dust, and stacks of glossy magazines. I helped get Dad into his recliner, settled him with a blanket and a glass of water, and then walked into the kitchen. The table was a disaster zone of unopened envelopes. It looked like a paper bomb had detonated. This was the landscape of my childhood. Late notices, final warnings, offers for high-interest credit cards. I sat down, opened my laptop, and sighed. Marlene tossed a notebook onto the table. Passwords are in there, she said, pouring herself a glass of white wine. I'm going to sit with Grant. You are an angel. Lila, really, an angel. She disappeared into the living room. I could hear the television turn on. The low murmur of a game show. I opened the notebook. Marlene's handwriting was looped and decorative, utterly impractical. I found the login for their main checking account and the joint savings. I logged in, ready to schedule the electric bill and the water. The balance in the checking account was $42. My stomach dropped. I clicked over to the savings. $300. How were they living? Dad's pension was decent. Marlene consulted occasionally, whatever that meant. Though I never saw a paycheck, I started clicking through the transaction history. My project manager brain shifting into forensic mode. Groceries, wine shop, gas station, a boutique in the city center, $300 at a salon. Then I saw it, a transfer, $200, sent to Credit Union Holding, X8890. I scrolled back. 2 days prior, another transfer, $150. I went back a month. There were dozens of them. Small amounts. Never more than $400. Always odd numbers like 390 or 215. It was a slow bleed, a drip feed of cash leaving the main ecosystem and vanishing into a satellite account I didn't recognize. I frowned, scrolling back further. 6 months? A year? Then I froze. Among the source accounts listed in the transfer drop-down menu, there was one labeled Lila Education Joint. My breath caught in my throat. That account was ancient. It was a custodial savings account my mother started before she died, which Dad had kept his name on. I had assumed it was closed years ago when I moved the bulk of the money to my own bank at 22. I hadn't thought about it in a decade. I checked the balance. It was active, and it was being drained. I clicked the transaction history for that specific account. For the last 3 years, money had been moving out of it, not the money I had moved away. That was safe in my high-yield fortress. But this was the residue, the interest, and something else. I saw deposits. $5,000. 2 years ago. $10,000. 18 months ago. These were checks deposited into the account. I clicked on the image of the deposit slip for the $10,000. The handwriting on the endorsement line was shaky. It was Dad's. Inheritance distribution. Aunt Sarah. The memo line read, I remembered Aunt Sarah passing away. Dad had told me there wasn't much left after debts. But here was $10,000, deposited into a joint account with my name on it, an account I didn't know still existed, and then slowly, methodically siphoned out in $300 increments to this mystery credit union account. The total withdrawn over the last 2 years was nearly $18,000. I sat there, the hum of the refrigerator sounding like a jet engine in the quiet kitchen. This wasn't just poor management. This was structuring, keeping transfers small to avoid alerts. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy, and walked into the living room. Marlene looked up from her magazine. "Done already?" "You are fast, Marlene," I said, keeping my voice level. "What is the credit union holding account?" She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just took a sip of her wine. "Oh, just a rainy day fund. Why?" "Because there are transfers going into it from a joint account with my name on it." I said, "An account I didn't know was open. And that account has deposits in it that Dad never mentioned." Marlene set her glass down. She did it slowly, with great deliberation, as if I were a child who had interrupted an important conversation. "Lila," she said, her voice dropping an octave into a tone of disappointed patience, "your father and I move money around to manage the household. It gets complicated. That account is it's family money. It's for emergencies. It's in my name, Marlene, and it's empty. Where's the money going?" She stood up then. The smile vanished. Her face hardened into a mask of righteous indignation. "Is this really what we are doing?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at Dad, who was dozing in the chair. "Your father is lying there, recovering from a near-death experience, his heart barely pumping enough blood to keep him alive. And you are standing here auditing us?" "I am not auditing you. I am asking why money is moving out of an account with my name on it into an account I can't see." "You are counting pennies," she hissed, stepping closer. Her perfume was floral and cloying. "You have always been like this, obsessed with your little hoard. We are drowning in medical bills. Lila, we are trying to keep a roof over our heads, and you are worried about—" "What? A technicality?" "It's $18,000. Marlene, that's not a technicality." She laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "Oh, listen to her, the big project manager. You think you are the only one who knows how to handle money? We use that money to live, to eat, to pay for the things your father needs. Because unlike you, sitting in your studio apartment counting your gold coins, we actually have a life to maintain." Dad stirred. He blinked his eyes open, looking confused. "Marlene? Lila? What's wrong?" Marlene spun around, her face instantly softening into a mask of concern. "Nothing, darling, nothing at all. Lila is just upset about the paperwork. She thinks we are spending too much money on your medication." That was a lie so bold it took my breath away. I didn't say that. I said, my voice rising, "Dad, there is money moving." "Lila, please," Dad said. His voice was thin, reedy. He looked from me to Marlene, panic flaring in his eyes. He didn't want the truth. He wanted the noise to stop. "I thought it was handled. Whatever it is, I thought it was handled. It is handled." Marlene soothed, stroking his hair. "Lila is just stressed. She's leaving now." Dad looked at me. His eyes were wet. "Please, honey, don't make it a fight. I can't take a fight right now. My head hurts." The sentence hit me in the center of my chest. Don't make it a fight. It was the anthem of my youth. Keep the peace. Swallow the truth. Let Marlene rewrite history because correcting her creates a scene. And scenes are dangerous. I looked at him. A man who had once been strong enough to lift me onto his shoulders, now reduced to a ghost haunting his own life. If I pushed this now, if I laid out the spreadsheets and the deposit slips, his blood pressure would spike. He might end up back in that hospital bed. And Marlene knew it. She was holding his health hostage. "Okay," I said. I swallowed the rage, tasting bile. "Okay, Dad, I'm sorry. I'll go." I grabbed my laptop bag and walked out. Marlene didn't say goodbye. She just watched me go. A small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. 2 days later, I was back at my desk at the logistics firm, staring at a manifest for a shipment of steel beams, when my cousin Clara called. Clara was one of the few relatives I still spoke to regularly. She was flighty but kind, the sort of person who sent birthday cards with $5 in them even when you were 30. "Lila," she chirped, "I am so excited for the party." I held the phone away from my ear. "What party?" "The housewarming," Clara said, "for Grant and Marlene's new place, in Briarwood Heights. I just got the Evite. It looks gorgeous. Lee, are you helping with the food?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Briarwood Heights?" I repeated. "Yeah. The invite says, 'New beginnings in Briarwood.' It's in 2 weeks. I thought you'd know." Marlene posted all those photos on Facebook this morning. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Briarwood Heights was not a neighborhood for people with $42 in their checking account. It was a neighborhood of manicured lawns, homeowners associations with draconian rules about mailbox paint, and houses that started at $600,000. I opened Facebook. I had unfollowed Marlene years ago to save my sanity, but we were still friends. I navigated to her profile. There it was. A photo of a 2-story colonial with pale yellow siding and a wraparound porch. The caption read, "God is good. So blessed to finally bring Grant home to the sanctuary he deserves. New chapter, family blessings, #homeowner, #fresh start." The comments were a slurry of congratulations. "So happy for you guys. You deserve this. Marlene, Lila must be so lucky to have such a beautiful place to visit." I stared at the screen. My father couldn't afford a new transmission for his car. I was paying his pharmacy copays. How in the hell had they bought a house in Briarwood Heights? I left work early. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which was technically true, even if the emergency was a crime in progress. I drove to the address listed on the Evite. It was real. 4402 Cedar Lark Lane. The house sat on a hill, overlooking the valley. It had fresh landscaping. There was a wreath on the door made of dried lavender. I parked down the street and just stared at it. It was charming. It was renovated. It was expensive. It made no sense. Even if they had liquidated everything, which they didn't have, they couldn't afford the down payment. Dad's credit was shot from the bankruptcy 10 years ago. Marlene didn't have an income. I watched as a delivery truck pulled up. 2 men got out and unloaded a massive, flat-screen television box. Marlene came out to the porch, pointing and directing them. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who had won. I drove home in silence. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on my floor, opened my laptop, and pulled up the screenshots I had taken of the joint account. I started cross-referencing. The transfers, the small ones, 300, 400. I looked at the dates. January 12th, Dad had the flu. Marlene called me crying about the heating bill. Transfer of $300 out. March 4th, Dad went in for a checkup on his heart. Transfer of $400 out. 3 days ago, Dad collapsed in the hardware store. I checked the timestamp on the transfer I had seen at the hospital. 8:45 a.m. Dad had collapsed at 9 a.m. The money had been moved 15 minutes before the ambulance was called. A cold chill went through me that had nothing to do with the drafty window. This wasn't panic spending. This wasn't, "We are broke and need help." This was strategic. Marlene was moving money when she knew Dad would be incapacitated, when chaos would provide cover. She was timing the thefts around the crises so that if anyone noticed, she could scream emergency and shut down the inquiry. She was using his illness as a smokescreen for embezzlement. I reached for my phone to call Dad, to scream the truth at him, but I stopped. I remembered his face at the table. Don't make it a fight. If I called him now, Marlene would spin it. She would say I was jealous of the new house. She would say I was being petty. She would say the money was used for the down payment, for the family, and that I was trying to ruin their happiness. Dad would buckle. He always buckled. And I would be the villain, exiled from the family, while she kept draining him dry until there was nothing left. I needed more than suspicion. I needed leverage. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number on the back of my debit card. First National Bank. This is Kevin. How can I help you? Hi. Kevin, my name is Lila Reed. I need to inquire about an account I'm listed on. It's a joint savings ending in 4421. One moment. Ms. Reed, let me pull that up. The hold music was a synthesized jazz loop. I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. Okay, I have that account here. Kevin said, joint owners, Grant Reed and Lila Reed. What can I do for you? I need to know who is authorized to transfer funds from this account to external institutions. Specifically, a credit union. Kevin typed for a moment. I see an authorization on file for external transfers. It connects to an account at Harbor Glen Credit Union. Who signed that authorization? I asked. It looks like a standard form. Ms. Reed, signed by both account holders. When? Kevin paused. Let me check the document image. Here it is. It was processed, wow. This is an old one. It was processed 6 years ago. September 14th. 6 years ago. I closed my eyes. 6 years ago. I was living in Chicago for a year, working a contract job. I wasn't even in Harbor Glen on September 14th. Can you send me a copy of that signature card? I asked, my voice steady. Though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I can upload it to your secure message center right now. Thank you. Kevin. I hung up and refreshed the page. A PDF appeared. I opened it. There were 2 signatures at the bottom of the form. One was Dad's, looking firm and clear. Not the shaky scrawl he had now. The other was mine. It looked like my signature. The loop on the L was right. The slant was right, but it was too clean. It lacked the tiny hesitation mark I always made between my first and last name, a habit I'd picked up in grad school to prevent cramps during exams. I stared at the forgery. It was good. Marlene had been practicing. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. A strange, cold calm settled over me. It was the same feeling I got when a project timeline collapsed, and I had to rebuild the schedule from scratch. The panic vanished, replaced by pure, crystalline focus. Marlene had stolen $18,000 from me. She was manipulating my father. She was buying a house she couldn't afford with money she shouldn't have. She wanted me to be the angry stepdaughter. She wanted me to yell and accuse so she could play the victim. I wasn't going to give her that. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it the Housewarming. I dragged the PDF of the forged signature into it. I dragged the screenshots of the transfers into it. Then I opened a blank document and typed a list. 1. Find out how they bought the house. 2. Trace the credit union account. 3. Smile. I closed the laptop. Marlene wanted a housewarming party? Fine. I would give her one she would never forget. The branch manager's office at First National smelled of carpet cleaner and stale ambition. I sat across from a man named Mr. Henderson, who had the weary look of someone who spent his days apologizing for computer errors he didn't cause. On the desk between us lay a photocopy of a document that was supposedly signed by me when I was 22 years old. Mr. Henderson tapped the paper with a pen. As you can see, the authorization is technically valid. It was processed as a durable power of attorney for this specific account, granting transfer rights to the secondary holder and their designated external links. I looked at the signature. It was a loop-for-loop recreation of how I signed my name a decade ago. It was good. It was terrifyingly good. But the date field was empty, and the witness line was a scrawl that looked like a bird had flown into the inkwell. It is incomplete, I said, keeping my voice flat. There is no date next to the signature, and the witness section is illegible. Mr. Henderson sighed. It is irregular, I admit, but at the time, the bank's policy on family joint accounts was looser. If Mr. Reed brought this in, and he is the primary account holder, the teller likely just pushed it through. It's a legacy document. Ms. Reed, legacy, a word that was starting to taste like ash in my mouth. So, I said, let me get this straight. Based on a form that is missing a date and has a witness who might not exist, My stepmother has been able to funnel money from an account bearing my name into a credit union account I cannot access? Technically, your father authorized the link. The form just gave him the power to do it without your physical presence at the teller window. I stared at the paper. This wasn't just theft. It was architecture. Marlene had laid this foundation years ago. Perhaps just in case. Or perhaps because she knew eventually she would bleed the main accounts dry and need a fresh vein to tap. I walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun of Harbor Glen. The humidity hit me like a wet towel. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the traffic crawl by, and felt a fissure opening up inside me. For my entire adult life, I had operated on a simple binary. I was the protector, and my father was the protected. I absorbed the stress, I managed the crises, and I kept the peace, because I knew he was too fragile to handle the reality of his own life. But looking at that forged signature, I realized that my desire to protect him had become the very mechanism Marlene was using to exploit me, by staying silent to keep his blood pressure down. I was essentially handing her the PIN code to my future. I had to protect him, but I also had to protect myself. The two imperatives were suddenly at war, and I didn't know how to serve one without destroying the other. I needed a strategy. I needed to stop reacting and start plotting. Tessa Ward was the only person in the world who knew exactly how much money was in my savings account and exactly how many times I had cried in a bathroom stall because of Marlene. We met at a coffee shop near the marina, the kind of place where the espresso tasted like burnt rubber, but the Wi-Fi was fast. "You need a lawyer," Tessa said. She didn't whisper. She said it over the rim of her latte, loud enough that the guy working on a screenplay at the next table looked up. I flinched. "Keep it down. And I can't get a lawyer. If I sue them, it kills Dad. Literally. The stress will finish what the hypertension started. Lila, she is stealing from you. This isn't borrowing a 20 from your purse. This is grand larceny. She is building a nest egg with your bricks." "I know. So stop being a martyr. You have this complex, you know? You think if you just suffer quietly enough, eventually the universe will hand you a gold star. It won't. Marlene will just take the star and pawn it." I stirred my iced tea, watching the condensation pool on the table. It's not about being a martyr. It's about leverage. If I go in guns blazing, she plays the victim. She tells the whole family I'm attacking a sick man and his devoted wife. I become the villain. I need to be smarter than that. Tessa leaned back, crossing her arms. Then get a lawyer who understands that. Not a shark. A surgeon. Someone who can cut the cancer out without killing the patient. I hesitated. The idea of involving a legal professional felt like crossing a Rubicon. It felt aggressive, vindictive. But then I thought about the house in Briarwood Heights. I thought about the fresh start caption. I thought about the empty date field on that authorization form. Marlene relied on my fear of looking mean. She banked on my decency. My hesitation was her security system. "I'll look into it," I said. Nadia Vance did not have an office with mahogany desks and leather chairs. She worked out of a converted loft in the Arts District, a space that was all clean lines, glass, and aggressive minimalism. She was a woman in her 40s with hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that looked like they cost more than my first car. She listened to my story without interrupting. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look sympathetic. She looked focused. When I finished explaining the transfers, the house, and the forgery, she tented her fingers. "You have a classic dilemma. Lila, you have the facts on your side, but you don't have the narrative." "The narrative?" I asked. "In family financial disputes, the truth is secondary to the story." Nadia said. Her voice was cool, detached. "If you file a police report today, you start a war. Your father is caught in the crossfire. The stepmother spins it as a daughter unwilling to help during a medical crisis. The forgery is old. She will claim you signed it and forgot, or that your father signed it with your verbal permission, which muddies the waters. It becomes a mess. So what do I do? Let her keep the money? No. Nadia said, "You recover the assets, but you do it by controlling the optics. We don't accuse, we clarify. We don't attack. We organize. She slid a notepad toward me. Rule number 1. Document everything. Every text, every email, every conversation. If you can legally record conversations in this state, and you can. We are a one-party consent state. Do it. Rule number 2. Never lose your temper. The moment you yell, you validate her claim that you are unstable or emotional. You must be the most reasonable person in the room. I nodded, writing this down. And rule number 3. Nadia continued. We need to know where the money went. You said she bought a house. Do you know who holds the deed? I assume she does. Or Dad. Never assume, Nadia said. People who structure bank transfers to avoid reporting limits rarely buy real estate under their own names. Check the county recorder. Find out who owns that house. That is your loose thread. Pull it. I left her office feeling lighter. I didn't have a weapon yet, but I had a map. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of cheap wine and the county property assessor's website open on my laptop. I typed in the address, 4402 Cedar Lark Lane. The search wheel spun. The result popped up. Owner of record, Cedar Lark Holdings Trust. Trustee, Randall Pike. I stared at the screen. It wasn't Marlene. It wasn't Grant Reed. It was a trust. Why would a couple buying a retirement home put it in a trust named after the street it was on? That was corporate behavior, not family behavior. And who was Randall Pike? The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I searched the name. Randall Pike was a financial advisor with an office in a strip mall 3 towns over. I dug deeper. There were a few reviews on Yelp, mostly mediocre. Hard to get a hold of, said one. Fees were not explained clearly, said another. I went back to the trust document. The date of the deed transfer was 3 weeks ago. The down payment listed was substantial, $80,000. $80,000. My father didn't have $80,000. I knew his pension details. I knew his Social Security. Even if they had cashed out his 401k entirely, which would incur massive penalties, they wouldn't net that much after paying off their existing debts. The money had to come from somewhere else. I looked at the credit union holding transfers again. $18,000 from my account. Maybe another $20 from Dad's main savings. That was barely half. Where did the rest come from? The question gnawed at me. Marlene wasn't just stealing from me. She was pulling from sources I couldn't see yet. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Lunch tomorrow? The bistro on Main. Need to go over the party details. XOXO. I wanted to throw the phone into the harbor. Instead, I typed back, Sure, see you at noon. The bistro on Main was the kind of place that served salads on slate tiles and charged $4 for iced tea. When I arrived, Marlene was already seated at a patio table, holding court. She wasn't alone. Sitting with her were 2 women I recognized vaguely. Neighbors from their old rental complex. Women who wore too much jewelry and nodded enthusiastically at everything Marlene said. Witnesses. She had brought an audience. Lila, Marlene called out, waving a manicured hand. Over here! I walked over, forcing a smile. I was wearing my work clothes, a sensible blazer and slacks. Marlene was in a floral maxi dress that looked brand new. Ladies, you remember my stepdaughter, Lila? Marlene beamed. The corporate powerhouse. She is so busy. We are lucky she squeezed us in. Hi, I said, taking the empty seat. We were just talking about the housewarming. Marlene said, It is going to be such a blessing, a real celebration of survival, after everything Grant has been through. She trailed off, dabbing at her dry eyes with a napkin. The neighbors made sympathetic cooing noises. You are so strong. Marlene, one of them said, I just do what I have to do. Marlene sighed, and Lila has been helpful, in her way. I stiffened. In my way? She is so organized. Marlene continued, turning to the women, very intense about the numbers. You know how young people are today. Every penny has to be accounted for. I told her, Lila, relax. Life is about living, not hoarding. But she is very responsible. It was a masterclass in backhanded compliments. She had just called me cheap and neurotic while pretending to praise my responsibility. I remembered Nadia's advice. Be the most reasonable person in the room. Well, I said, picking up the menu, someone has to make sure the electricity stays on so you can enjoy the living. Right? Marlene laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. See? So serious. But we love her. Now, Lila, about the catering. I was thinking we should do a seafood tower. Grant loves shrimp. Shrimp is expensive, I said automatically. Marlene rolled her eyes at her friends. See? What did I tell you? I took a breath. I didn't say no. I said it's expensive. Do we have the budget for it? Budget. Schmudget. Marlene said breezily. It's a celebration. Put it on the card. We'll figure it out later. Besides, you can chip in, can't you? A little housewarming contribution? The women were watching me. If I said no, I looked stingy. If I said yes, I was agreeing to pay for my own exploitation. I smiled. A tight, shark-like smile. Actually, I've already picked out a very special gift for the house. I think you'll love it. It's sentimental. Marlene's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. She didn't like variables. She liked cash. Oh? Well, that's sweet. But maybe you can help with the wine. At least, I'll see what I can do, I said noncommittally. Throughout the lunch, I practiced a technique I had read about called gray rocking. I became as boring and unreactive as a stone. When she poked me about my single status, I nodded. When she made a joke about my old car, I agreed it was reliable. I asked neutral questions. So, the new house. I said casually, while chewing a crouton. It's in a trust, right? Cedar Lark Holdings? Marlene froze. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. The neighbors looked confused. How did you know that? Marlene asked, her voice dropping. Public record, I said, taking a sip of water. I was just curious about the neighborhood. Is there a tax benefit to doing it that way? Marlene recovered quickly. Oh, you know Grant. He gets paranoid about liability. He wanted it protected. It's just technical, boring stuff. Right, I said. And Randall Pike? Is he a friend of the family? Her face went pale beneath the bronzer. He's an advisor, she said sharply. Why are you interrogating me? Lila, can't we just have a nice lunch? I'm not interrogating, I said, widening my eyes in mock innocence. Just making conversation. The shrimp tower sounds great. By the way, I watched her hands. She was shredding her paper napkin into tiny, nervous confetti. I had her. She was scared. She didn't know how much I knew, and that uncertainty was making her sloppy. When the check came, Marlene ignored it. One of the neighbors reached for it, but Marlene waved her off. Lila can get it, she said. She's the one with the big corporate salary. It was $60 for 3 salads and an iced tea. I paid it. It was a small price for the information I had just gathered. That evening, I went to my father's rental to drop off his blood pressure medication. Marlene was out, probably shopping, and Dad was alone, watching an old Western on the TV. He looked better than he had at the hospital, but he still seemed diminished. He was sitting in the dark, the blue light of the television flickering over his face. Hey, Dad, I said, setting the pills on the side table. He jumped. Oh, hi. Honey, I didn't hear you come in. I sat on the arm of the sofa. How are you feeling? Tired, he said. Just tired. We sat in silence for a moment. On the screen, cowboys were riding across a desert. Dad, I said softly, I need to ask you something, and I promise I won't get mad. He stiffened. About the money? About the past. I said. He sighed, a long, rattling exhalation. Lila, I know you're upset, and you have a right to be. I waited. It was years ago, he said, his voice trembling. When I got laid off from the plant. You were in college. Things were tight. Marlene was panicking. I felt like such a failure. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. I borrowed from you, he whispered. From that account your mother left. I meant to put it back. I really did. But then the car broke down, and the roof leaked, and it just went. I've been trying to fix it. I promised myself I'd fix it before you found out. I felt a pang of sorrow for him. He sounded so broken. Dad, I said, when did you borrow it? Oh, back then. 7, 8 years ago? I frowned. 8 years ago? Yeah, I took about 5,000. Maybe 6. I stared at him. Dad, the account has been drained of $18,000 in the last 2 years. He looked at me, confusion clouding his eyes. What? No, that's not right. Marlene handles the... She said she was just moving things around to balance the interest rates. He didn't know. He was confessing to a crime he committed a decade ago, thinking it was the same crime happening now. Marlene was using his old guilt to cover her new theft. She was letting him believe that the missing money was his fault, his failure. So he wouldn't question where the current funds were going. It was gaslighting on an industrial scale. I realized then that if I told him the truth, that Marlene was stealing now, right under his nose, he wouldn't be able to process it. He would defend her because defending her meant defending his own reality. He was too ashamed to look at the math. Okay, Dad, I said. Standing up, I swallowed the scream building in my throat. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. I walked out to my car and sat there for 10 minutes, shaking. He was a victim. He was an accomplice, yes. But mostly he was a victim, and she was playing him like a fiddle. The next morning, I called the credit union. I didn't identify myself as an account holder this time. I used a trick Nadia had suggested. Harbor Glen Credit Union. How can I help you? Hi, I said, putting on a confused, slightly frantic voice. My name is Lila Reed. I think I might have sent a transfer to the wrong account number. I was trying to send it to my aunt, Marlene. Oh gosh, what is the account name? Is it Pike or Reed? I was fishing. Marlene's maiden name was Pike. The trustee was Randall Pike. It was a hunch. The teller hesitated. I can't give out account information. Ma'am. I know. I just want to verify the name so I don't send money to a stranger. It's for a family gift. Is the account under Marlene Pike? Or maybe Marlene Reed Family Trust? There was a pause. I heard typing. I see an account here with the last name Pike, the teller said cautiously. It has a family access notation. Pike? I asked. Just Pike? It's listed as, well, it's a joint account. Pike and Reed, Marlene and her brother. My father wasn't on that account. Okay, I said, my voice dropping the frantic act. Thank you. That's all I needed to know. I hung up. The picture was coming into focus. Marlene was siphoning money from my father and me into an account she shared with her brother. Randall, the trustee, then used that money to buy the house through a trust. The house wasn't for Dad. If Dad died, and with his health, that was a real possibility. The house belonged to the trust. The trust was controlled by Randall. Marlene was the beneficiary. My father was paying for a house he didn't own, for a future he wouldn't be part of. She was effectively embezzling his entire estate while he was still alive. I looked at the calendar. The housewarming party was in 4 days. I could go to the police, but it was messy. It was family access. It was civil, not criminal, until proven otherwise. And Dad would deny everything to save face. No, I needed something that would bypass his denial. I needed something that would force the truth into the light in a way that Marlene couldn't spin and Dad couldn't ignore. I needed to trap her. I thought about the gift I had mentioned at lunch. I had been bluffing then, but now the idea took root. Marlene wanted a celebration of her new home. She wanted to show off. She wanted validation. She was hosting a party to cement her ownership of this new life. I would give her a gift that honored that ownership. I grabbed a notebook and started sketching. A book. A beautiful, leather-bound book. The Home Legacy book. It would look like a sentimental scrapbook. Photos of the house, nice quotes about family, but inside, I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Inside, I would put pages that required signatures. Property stewardship, mortgage verification, source of funds dedication, I would create a ceremonial moment at the party where everyone had to sign the book to bless the home. I would put the deed copy in a clear sleeve. I would put the trust summary in another. I would force her to publicly acknowledge the structure of the purchase in front of her friends, her neighbors, and most importantly, my father. If she refused to sign, she looked like she was hiding something. If she signed, she was creating a legal paper trail that contradicted her lies. And if she tried to brush it off, I would have the documents right there, ready to be pulled out of their decorative pockets. I picked up my phone and called a custom bindery shop downtown. "Hi," I said. "I have a rush order. I need a photo album made, but I need it to look like a legal ledger. Can you do gold leaf lettering?" "Yes?" "Great. I want the cover to say, 'The Reed Family Legacy.'" It was time to go to a party. My closet was a geological excavation of my life. Layers of eras pressed together. College textbooks, outdated winter coats, boxes of electronics cables I was too afraid to throw away. At the very bottom, beneath a heavy wool blanket that smelled of cedar, was the shoebox. It was a standard Nike box from the 90s, the cardboard corners softening with age. I pulled it out and sat cross-legged on the floor of my bedroom. Outside, the wind was whipping rain against the window pane, a rhythmic drumming that usually soothed me. Tonight, it sounded like a countdown. I opened the lid. Inside were the artifacts of a woman I barely remembered but missed every single day. My mother's handwriting was everywhere. Recipes for casseroles she never perfected, birthday cards with underlined emphatic love, and a bundle of letters tied with a frayed blue ribbon. I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was looking for evidence. I untied the ribbon. The paper was thin, airmail weight. I sifted through them until I found an envelope marked, "For Lila. Keep safe." It wasn't a letter she had mailed. It was a note she had tucked away. I unfolded it. The ink was fading to a dusty purple. "My sweet girl." It read, "Your grandfather wasn't a rich man, but he was a careful one. He wanted to make sure you had a foundation. The check enclosed is for you. I'm going to put it in the credit union for now, in a special account. Don't touch it for clothes or cars. This is for your roof. When you are ready to buy a home, this will be your key." I stared at the paper. Your roof. I remembered the check now, vaguely. I was 19 when she showed it to me. $10,000. To a teenager. It was a fortune. To a 33-year-old trying to buy property in a coastal city, it was a down payment. It was the seed money. I looked at the date on the note. 14 years ago. If that money had been placed in an account designated for me, and if that account was the Lila Education joint account I had seen drained, then Marlene hadn't just stolen household funds. She had raided a specific, earmarked legacy. I took a photo of the letter. My hand was steady, but my stomach was churning acid. Nadia Vance studied the photo on my phone screen. We were in her office again, the minimalist space feeling even colder today. "This changes the complexion of the intent," Nadia said. She handed the phone back to me. "If we can prove that the original deposit into that joint account was this inheritance, and that the intent was custodial, meaning holding it for your benefit, then your father's authority to withdraw it becomes legally murky." But his name was on the account. I said, "Yes, but there is a concept called fiduciary duty. Even within families, if that money was grandfathered in as a specific gift to you, and he allowed his wife to drain it for her own real estate purchase, that is a breach. It moves from messy family borrowing to misappropriation of funds." She leaned forward. "It gives us a bigger stick, Lila, but you have to be willing to swing it." I looked out the window. Down on the street, people were walking with umbrellas, heads down against the drizzle. I didn't want to swing a stick at my father. I wanted him to wake up. "I found something else," I said, or rather, "I'm looking for something else." I requested the full history of authorization changes from the bank. "Good," Nadia said. "Keep digging. The more paper we have, the less room she has to wiggle. But be careful, Lila. When people like Marlene feel the walls closing in, they don't surrender. They escalate. The escalation came in the form of a dinner invitation. Family dinner. The text from Marlene read, Just us and the Pikes. Need to celebrate getting through the rough patch. 7 p.m. The Pikes, her brother, Randall, the trustee, would be there. I wore my armor, a navy blue sheath dress and a blazer. I did my hair in a severe bun. I arrived at the rental at 7 o'clock sharp. The air inside was thick with the smell of roast chicken and expensive perfume. Marlene was in the kitchen, humming. Randall was in the living room with Dad. Randall Pike was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced used car salesmen. He had shiny skin, a suit that fit a little too tightly across the shoulders, and a smile that appeared and disappeared like a switch was being flipped. "Lila!" he boomed, standing up to shake my hand. His palm was damp. "Good to see you. Hearing great things about your work at the logistics firm. Supply chain is the future, right? Something like that." I said, "Hi, Dad." Dad was sitting in his recliner, holding a glass of iced tea. He looked tired, but he offered me a weak smile. "Hi. Honey, glad you could make it." We moved to the dining table. Marlene had set it with the good china, my mother's china. I noted with a sharp pang of resentment. The conversation started with the usual banalities. The weather, the traffic, Randall's golf game. I ate my chicken and waited. I knew this wasn't just a dinner. Marlene never did anything without a script. Halfway through the meal, Marlene tapped her glass with a spoon. The sound rang out, sharp and demanding. "I just want to say something," she began, looking around the table with misty eyes. "The last few weeks have been so hard. Grant's health. It really scared me, but it also showed me how blessed we are." She reached out and squeezed Dad's hand. He looked down at his plate, embarrassed, and I want to say a special thank you to Lila, Marlene said, turning her gaze on me. The table went quiet. Lila stepped up. She continued. "She helped with the bills. She helped with the organization. You know, it's not easy asking for help, but Lila, you were so generous to float us through the gaps. It really shows that when push comes to shove, everything we have is just one big family resource." I froze. She was doing it. She was rewriting the narrative in real time. By thanking me for helping, she was framing the stolen money as a contribution I had knowingly made. If I nodded and smiled, I was tacitly agreeing that I had given her the money. If I argued, I looked like a monster ruining a toast. I put my fork down. I didn't smile. "I'm glad I could help clarify the accounts," I said, my voice neutral. It was certainly eye-opening to see where the money goes. Marlene's smile faltered for a microsecond, then reattached itself. "Exactly," she chirped. "It takes a village. Right, Randall?" "Absolutely," Randall said. "Cutting a piece of chicken. Family capital. It's all about liquidity and flow. You help us. We help you. That's how wealth is built." "We help you?" I thought, "You haven't helped me since I was 12. So, speaking of wealth," I said, turning to Randall. "I looked up the new house, Briarwood Heights. That's a significant investment." Randall chewed slowly. "It's a solid market, good equity potential." "And the trust?" I asked. "Cedar Lark Holdings? That's an interesting structure." Randall stopped chewing. He looked at Marlene. Marlene looked at her wine glass. "Standard estate planning," Randall said, his voice tightening. "Asset protection. You know how it is." "Actually, I don't," I said. "Dad, do you know how the trust works?" I turned to my father. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. He shifted in his chair, glancing nervously at Marlene. "Oh, well, you know," he stammered. "Marlene handled the technical stuff. I trust her judgment. It's for the best." He sounded like a hostage reading a ransom note. "It's for the best." Marlene laughed. A high, brittle sound. "Goodness, Lila, not at the dinner table. You are boring Randall to death with legal talk. Let's have dessert. I bought that lemon tart you like." She stood up and rushed to the kitchen. I watched her go. She was terrified. And Randall was uncomfortable. They were hiding something specific about that trust. And my father was the shield they were hiding behind. The next day, I met Tessa for lunch. She slid her phone across the table before I had even sat down. "Look at this," she said. I looked. It was an Instagram profile for a woman named Sherry, one of Marlene's gym friends. Scroll down. Tessa commanded. I scrolled. Pictures of sunsets, avocado toast, cats, then, a post from 4 months ago. It was a selfie of Sherry and Marlene holding champagne flutes. The caption read, "So proud of my girl Marlene. Finally making moves to leave that rental life behind. Big things coming in Briarwood. Hashtag, new chapter, hashtag, manifesting. 4 months ago. Grant's collapse was 3 weeks ago. The narrative Marlene was spinning, that the house purchase was a sudden, miraculous opportunity that arose just as Dad got sick, or that they had to move for his health, was a lie. She had been planning this for months. She was celebrating leaving the rental life, while my father was still going to work every day to pay the rent on that rental. She knew. I whispered. She knew she was going to buy it way back then. And look at the date, Tessa said. April 12th. I pulled up my spreadsheet on my phone. April 12th. A transfer of $400 from the joint account. April 14th. A transfer of $300. She was siphoning the money to build her manifestation. This wasn't a desperate wife trying to cope. This was a calculated exit strategy. When I got back to my apartment, there was a large envelope in my mailbox from the bank. The requested documents. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Copies of signature cards, change of address forms, and the authorization form for the external transfer to the credit union. I looked at the authorization form again. I had seen the digital copy, but the physical copy had something the scan had obscured. A stamp. Down in the corner, faint but legible, was a notary seal. Paulina Kerr, Notary Public. Commission expires, 2024. And below it, a handwritten note. ID, verified via DL. DL, driver's license. If I wasn't there to sign it, whose driver's license did they use? Or did the notary just wave it through? I searched for Paulina Kerr. She wasn't at a bank. She was a mobile notary. Kerr Mobile Services, we come to you. I called the number. Kerr Services. A woman's voice answered. She sounded breathless, like she was walking fast. Hi, is this Paulina? Speaking. My name is Lila Reed. You notarized a document for my family a few years ago. A bank authorization form. I'm just trying to clear up a discrepancy with the bank, and I was wondering if you keep records of your appointments? Look, honey, I do 10 signings a day. I don't remember a document from years ago. It was for Marlene Reed. I said, or maybe Marlene Pike. She would have been memorable, very talkative, probably in a rush. There was a pause. Marlene, the woman said. The blonde? With the nervous husband? My heart skipped a beat. Yes. The nervous husband. Yeah, I remember her. I remember because she called me at 6 in the morning and offered to pay double if I came before 8. Said it was an emergency medical authorization or something. Before 8 in the morning. And the husband? I asked. Was he there? Yeah, he was there. Sitting at the kitchen table. Looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He signed everything she put in front of him. Didn't even read it. And the other signature? I asked. My signature? I don't recall another person being there. But you stamped it. I said. Silence. Look, the woman said. Her voice defensive now. If the husband said he had power of attorney, or if the signature was already there and he vouched for it sometimes. In family situations, you exercise discretion. I verified his ID. He was the primary account holder. She had bent the rules. Marlene had pressured her, paid her double, and used Dad's presence to legitimize a forgery. Thank you. Paulina, I said. You've been very helpful. I didn't need Paulina to testify. I just needed to know that the transaction was built on pressure and speed. Marlene operated in the blur. She created urgency so no one had time to look closely. I sat in my car outside my father's rental for 20 minutes before I went in. This was the crossroads. I could take all of this, the notary, the letters, the bank statements, and drop it on the dining room table like a bomb. I could scream at Marlene. I could shame Dad. But if I did that, Dad would shatter. He was fragile. He would retreat into denial. He would side with Marlene because the alternative, admitting he had been a fool and a pawn, was too painful for his pride to bear. I had to bypass his pride. I had to speak to the part of him that was still my father, not Marlene's husband. I went inside. Marlene was gone. At the new house. Measuring for curtains. She had said, Dad was alone. He was in the garage, tinkering with a broken toaster. It was a pathetic sight. A man who used to build deck furniture now trying to fix a $20 appliance. Hey, Dad? He looked up, startled. He dropped the screwdriver. Lila. You scared me. I walked over and leaned against the workbench. The smell of sawdust and oil brought a sudden, sharp memory of him teaching me to ride a bike. He hadn't always been this ghost. Dad, I said, put the toaster down. He looked at me, confused. But he said it on the bench. I need you to listen to me, I said, and I need you to not say, it's handled. I need you to talk to me like I'm 33 years old, not 13. He wiped his hands on a rag. His eyes darted to the door, checking for Marlene. She's not here, I said. It's just us. What is it? Lila? I know about the money. Dad, I know about the $18,000 from the joint account. I know about the inheritance from Mom's dad. I know Marlene has been moving it to the credit union. He opened his mouth to speak, to recite the script. Don't, I said sharply. Don't lie for her. I have the bank records. I have the notary statement. I know you signed things you didn't read. He slumped. It wasn't a figure of speech. His entire body seemed to deflate, his shoulders curving inward. He leaned back against the workbench, covering his face with his grease-stained hands. I'm sorry, he mumbled into his palms. Why, Dad? I asked. Why did you let her do it? That money was for my house. It was what Mom left for me. He dropped his hands. His face was gray. Because I'm drowning. Lila, he burst out. The shout was sudden, shocking in the quiet garage. I'm drowning, he repeated, quieter. I have been drowning for 10 years. The debt, the credit cards. I tried to fix it. I tried to trade stocks online. I lost $5,000 in a week. I felt so stupid. He looked at me, tears tracking through the grease on his cheeks. Marlene. She said she could fix it. She said she would handle the math. She said I didn't have to worry about the bills anymore. I just had to sign. And it felt so good. Lila, it felt so good to just stop knowing, to stop looking at the balances and feeling like a failure. So you let her take my money? She said it was borrowing. She said we would pay it back with the house equity. She said she was investing it for all of us. He believed it. Or he had forced himself to believe it because the alternative was admitting he had let his wife rob his daughter. Dad, I said, stepping closer, there is no equity for us. The house is in a trust. Randall is the trustee. If something happens to you, Marlene gets everything. I get nothing. And the debt? I bet the debt is still there. He looked at me with horror. No. She said the trust protects us. It protects her. Dad. He shook his head, a slow, rhythmic denial. No, no. She loves me. She takes care of me. She is using you. I said gently, she used your shame to silence you. She knew you wouldn't ask questions because you didn't want to feel stupid. He started to cry, not the polite, silent crying of a funeral, but deep, heaving sobs of a man who has been carrying a crushing weight for a decade. I hugged him. He felt frail in my arms. I'm sorry. He sobbed. I'm so sorry. Bean. I held him until he stopped shaking. Listen to me, I said, pulling back to look him in the eye. I'm not going to sue you. I am not going to leave you. But I'm going to get that money back, and I'm going to expose what she did. How? He wiped his nose. She's too good at this. She'll spin it. She'll make you look crazy. I know. I said, that's why I'm not going to fight her with words. I'm going to fight her with her own pride. The party? He asked. The party. I confirmed. You just have to do one thing for me, Dad. Anything. When I hand her the book. I said, When I ask you to sign the page, don't look at her. Look at me. And pick up the pen." He nodded. He looked terrified, but he nodded. I spent the next 2 nights constructing the weapon. I bought a high-end scrapbook album, the kind with leather binding and heavy, cream-colored cardstock pages. I printed photos of the new house, the ones Marlene had posted on Facebook. I printed photos of Dad and Marlene from years ago. I glued them in, creating a beautiful, sentimental narrative of their life together. The early years, building a life, challenges overcome. It looked like a loving tribute from a devoted stepdaughter. Then, I reached the final section. I created a page titled, "The Legacy of Stewardship." I used a fancy font, something that looked like a wedding invitation, to bless this home and ensure its future for the Reed family. We hereby acknowledge the foundations upon which it was built. Below that, I glued 4 heavy-duty transparent document sleeves to the page. I labeled them with gold stickers. 1. Deed of Trust. 2. Verification of down payment sources. 3. Mortgage liability. Release. 4. Family asset map. And at the bottom of the page, I created signature lines. Grant Reed, Family Patriarch. Marlene Reed, Family Matriarch. Witnessed by. I typed up a summary of the down payment sources. It listed the exact amounts transferred from the joint account, the dates, and the inheritance notation. I printed it on official-looking bonded paper and slid it into the sleeve. I printed a copy of the trust deed showing Randall Pike as the trustee and slid that into the first sleeve. The book was heavy. It felt substantial. It felt like a trapdoor waiting to be sprung. I closed the cover. The Reed family legacy gleamed in gold foil. It was perfect. If Marlene refused to look at it, she would seem ungrateful. If she opened it, she would see the truth staring back at her. And if she tried to sign it to play along, she would be signing a confession that the money came from me. But she wouldn't sign it. I knew her. She would panic. She would try to deflect, and in that deflection, in front of her friends and her neighbors and her judgmental brother, she would reveal exactly who she was. I put the book in a gift box and wrapped it in silver paper. I tied a massive white bow on top. The party was tomorrow. I was ready. The driveway of 4402 Cedar Lark Lane was lined with cars that cost more than my annual salary. There were Lexuses, a vintage Mercedes, and a scattering of pristine SUVs that looked like they had never encountered a speck of mud. The house itself glowed in the twilight, light pouring from every window as if the structure was trying to prove its own existence to the darkening street. It was a beautiful house. It was a stolen house. I sat in my sedan, parked 2 blocks away to avoid ruining the aesthetic of Marlene's driveway. Beside me, Nadia Vance checked her lipstick in the rearview mirror. She wasn't here as my attorney today. She was here as my friend, a witness in silk and pearls, ready to observe a social demolition. "Are you ready?" Nadia asked. She snapped her compact shut. I touched the silver box on my lap. It was heavy. Inside lay the home legacy book, a beautiful Trojan horse bound in navy leather. "I am ready," I said. I felt a strange lack of nervousness. For weeks, my stomach had been a knot of anxiety, but now that the moment was here, my pulse was slow and steady. It was the calm of the executioner. "Remember," Nadia said, smoothing her skirt, "you are the loving stepdaughter. You are the sentimental archivist. You are not angry. You are just thorough. I repeated. We got out of the car. The air smelled of jasmine and charcoal grills. As we walked up the driveway, I could hear the hum of the party, the clinking of glass, the rise and fall of laughter, the smooth jazz playlist drifting from outdoor speakers. Marlene had gone all out. There were caterers moving through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. There was a bartender mixing cocktails on the patio. The front door was wide open, welcoming the world into her triumph. We stepped into the foyer. It was grand, with a vaulted ceiling and a chandelier that cast fractured rainbows on the hardwood floors. "Lila!" Marlene materialized from the crowd like a magician's trick. She looked spectacular. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that flowed around her like water, and her hair was swept up in a chignon that defied gravity. She held a champagne flute in one hand and was radiating a terrifying level of charm. "You made it!" Marlene cried, pulling me into a hug that was both tight and distant. She smelled of expensive vanilla and adrenaline. "And you brought a friend!" "This is Nadia," I said, pulling back. "An old friend from college. She's in town for the weekend. I hope you don't mind. The more the merrier." Marlene beamed at Nadia. "Welcome to our new beginning. Please, get a drink, eat. There is so much food." She turned back to me, her eyes scanning my outfit. A modest, elegant dress that didn't compete with hers, and then landing on the silver box in my hands. "And what is this?" she asked, touching the bow. "Just a little housewarming gift," I said. "I'll open it later, when things settle down." Marlene's eyes glittered. She loved gifts. She loved the performance of receiving them even more. "You are sweet," she said, squeezing my arm. "Really, I know we have had our stressors, but tonight is about family. I am so glad you are here." She actually meant it. In her mind, my presence validated her victory. If the victim showed up to the party, then there was no crime. "Go, mingle," she urged, pushing us gently toward the living room. "I have to find Grant. He is hiding from the neighbors somewhere." I watched her float away, greeting guests with touches on the arm and throw-your-head-back laughter. She was in her element. She was the queen of Briarwood Heights. I walked into the living room. It was packed. I recognized cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts who usually only showed up for funerals, and a large contingent of Marlene's friends, women who all seemed to have the same haircut and the same aggressive tan. I spotted Dad in the corner, near the fireplace. He was holding a scotch, looking terrified. He was wearing a new blazer that was slightly too big for him, emphasizing how much weight he had lost. I made my way to him. "Hey, Dad." He looked up, his eyes widening. "Lila, you came. I told you I would." He looked at the box in my hands. "Is that it?" "That's it," I said. He swallowed hard. He looked around the room, as if checking for exits. "Marlene is really happy tonight. Lila, everyone is having a good time. It is a great party." "Dad," I said gently. He looked at me, searching for mercy. "You promised not to make a scene." "I promised to be polite," I corrected. "And I will be." I saw Randall Pike across the room. He was talking to a man in a golf shirt, gesturing expansively with a skewer of shrimp. The trustee, the man who held the legal keys to this house while my father held the mortgage anxiety. I mingled. I played the part. "Oh, the house is gorgeous." "Aunt Carol?" I said, accepting a glass of white wine. "Yes, the natural light is amazing." "Yes, Uncle Bob. It is a big step up from the rental. They really worked hard for it." I moved through the room like a ghost, collecting snippets of conversation. "Paid cash." I heard. "Marlene said the trust fund finally matured. Lila is doing so well. She must have helped them out." The narrative was set. I was the silent benefactor, the successful daughter who had facilitated this miracle, and Marlene was the matriarch who had managed it all. An hour later, the music lowered. Marlene stepped onto the raised hearth of the fireplace. She tapped a spoon against her glass. "Everyone! If I could have your attention." The room went quiet. Faces turned toward her. She stood there, basking in the attention, glowing in the warm light of the recessed bulbs. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "This home, it is more than just walls and a roof. It is a dream. For a long time, Grant and I didn't know if we would ever get here. We had hard years. We had years where we didn't know if we would make rent." She paused. Dad looked down at his shoes. "But we kept the faith," Marlene said. "We kept believing that if we did the right thing, if we loved each other enough, we would find our sanctuary. And here we are." Applause rippled through the room. "And I have to say," she continued, her eyes finding me in the crowd, We didn't do it alone. Family is everything. We all pulled together. And I want to thank my stepdaughter, Lila, for being our rock during the transition. She raised her glass to me. To Lila, she toasted. To Lila. The room echoed. My face burned. She was doing it again, publicly claiming my money as a willing donation, cementing the lie in the minds of 50 witnesses. I smiled. I nodded. And then, before the applause died down, I stepped forward. I walked right up to the hearth. Marlene looked down at me, her smile freezing slightly at the edges. She hadn't scripted this. Thank you. Marlene, I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. It means so much to hear you say that. I lifted the silver box, since we are talking about how this home was built, and the legacy we are creating here. I wanted to give you this. It felt like the perfect moment. Marlene hesitated. She glanced at the crowd. They were watching, beaming, expecting a heartwarming moment between mother and daughter. She couldn't refuse. Oh, Lila, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. You shouldn't have. She reached down and took the box. Open it, someone shouted from the back. Marlene laughed. Okay. She untied the white bow. She tore the silver paper. She lifted the lid and pulled out the heavy, leather-bound book, The Reed Family Legacy. She ran her hand over the gold foil. It's beautiful, she said, and for a second, she meant it. She opened the cover. She saw the photos. Dad and her at the beach, the two of them at their wedding, the shots of the new house. Oh, she breathed. Look at this. Grant. Look. Dad stepped forward, peering over her shoulder. His face was pale. It's a history of us. Marlene told the room, turning the pages. Oh, look, there's the picture from the rental. We have come so far. She was loving it. I had fed her ego. And she was feasting. I waited. She flipped through the family milestones section. She flipped through the new beginnings section. And then, she turned the page to the end. The legacy of stewardship. I saw her back stiffen. She stared at the page. She stared at the clear plastic sleeves. She stared at the documents I had inserted inside them. Deed of trust. Cedar Lark Holdings. Proof of funding sources. Lila Reed Joint Account / Grant Reed Primary. Verification of inheritance funds. The silence stretched. It was only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Marlene didn't move. She didn't breathe. She was reading the labels on the pockets. What is this? She whispered, her voice tight. I stepped closer, keeping my tone warm, helpful, and loud enough for the front row to hear. It's the stewardship section, I said. I thought it would be meaningful to preserve exactly how you built this home. You always talk about legacy. Marlene, I wanted to make sure the story was complete. Marlene looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, panicked. The charm was evaporating, replaced by a cold, reptilian fear. This is paperwork, she said, trying to laugh. It sounded like a cough. Why would you put paperwork in a photo album? It's not just paperwork, I said gently. It's the history. See? I included the deed from the trust so everyone knows it's protected. And I put the summary of the funding sources in there. The inheritance money. The transfers. So we never forget how the family came together to make this happen. I pointed to the signature lines at the bottom of the page. And this is the best part. I added, it's a completion ritual. I thought you and Dad could sign the timeline, just to acknowledge the financial milestones. For the family record. Marlene tried to flip the page. She tried to close the book. Well, that's very detailed of you. Lila, she said, her voice rising in pitch. A bit boring for a party, though. Let's look at the photos again. I put my hand on the page, gently holding it open. Just a quick signature. I said, it symbolizes the transparency of the house, the truth of the foundation. A woman standing near the front. Dr. Celeste Harrow, Marlene's neighbor, leaned in. She was a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and a glass of red wine. Is that the trust deed? Celeste asked. Her voice was curious. Carrying through the sudden quiet of the room, my sister bought her place through a trust. Cedar Lark, isn't it? Fascinating structure. Does it list the beneficiaries? Marlene's head snapped toward Celeste. It's just standard legal stuff. Marlene stammered. Nothing interesting. Actually, it is interesting. I said, it shows that Randall is the trustee, and it shows the down payment came from the family accounts. I held out a gold pen. I had pulled it from my purse. Dad? I said, looking directly at my father. Grant Reed stood frozen. He looked at the book. He saw the proof of funding summary visible through the plastic sleeve. He saw the list of transfers. He saw the truth, printed on bonded paper. Staring him in the face, look at me. I had told him. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. He looked at Marlene, who was gripping the book so hard her knuckles were white. Go on, Grant, a cousin encouraged. Sign the book. It's a nice tradition. Dad reached out. His hand was shaking. He took the pen from me. Grant. Marlene hissed. He didn't look at her. He looked at the page. I should sign it, he said, his voice weak. It's the truth, isn't it? He moved the pen toward the signature line under Family Patriarch. No! The word ripped through the room like a gunshot. Marlene slammed the book shut, catching Dad's hand. The pen skittered across the cover and fell to the floor. The sound of the heavy book slamming echoed in the high ceilings. The room went dead silent. The jazz music seemed to suddenly get very loud. Marlene stood there, chest heaving, her hand clamping the book closed. Her face was twisted. Not the gracious host, not the loving wife, but a cornered animal showing its teeth. We are not doing this, she snapped. Her voice was jagged. We are not doing legal work in the middle of a party. It is ridiculous. It is rude. She looked at me, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. You are ruining this, she hissed. You always have to ruin everything with your obsession. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stayed perfectly still, my hands clasped in front of me. I'm sorry. Marlene, I said softly. I didn't think acknowledging the source of the money would be ruining anything. I thought you were proud of how we got here. I looked at the guests. They were staring. They were exchanging glances. The illusion was broken. The happy family veneer had cracked, revealing the rot underneath. Marlene hadn't just refused to sign a book. She had physically stopped her husband from acknowledging the truth. Everyone saw it. Doctor. Celeste Harrow took a sip of her wine, her eyes narrowing as she looked from Marlene to the book. Marlene tried to recover. She forced a laugh, but it sounded manic. Oh, listen to me. Getting all worked up, she cried, waving a hand. I want to drink champagne, not read contracts. Lila, you are so serious. Always the project manager. She shoved the book into Dad's chest. Put this away. Grant. In the office. Now. Dad held the book. He looked at me one last time. There was no confusion in his eyes anymore. Only shame. And a flicker of something else. Resolve. He turned and walked out of the room. Carrying the evidence. I smiled at the room. Sorry about that. Everyone, I said. I guess I got a little too sentimental about the details. Please, enjoy the party. I turned and walked away. I walked straight to Nadia, who was standing by the patio doors. She wasn't drinking. She was watching. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small black flash drive. It contained the folder, the housewarming, the bank statements, the notary confirmation, the photo of my mother's letter, the trust deed. I handed it to her. Did you see? I asked quietly. I saw, Nadia said. She took the drive and slipped it into her pocket, and so did everyone else. She snapped. I agreed. Go, Nadia said. I'll stay for 10 more minutes to listen to the whispers. Then I'll file the petition tomorrow morning. I walked out the front door. I didn't say goodbye to Marlene. I didn't say goodbye to Dad. I walked down the driveway, past the Lexus and the Mercedes. The cool night air hit my face, and I realized I was trembling. Not from fear, from the adrenaline of the kill. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go home. I drove to the marina and parked facing the water. I rolled down the window and let the smell of salt and diesel wash over me. I had done it. I had blown up the narrative. My phone buzzed an hour later. It was a text from Marlene. Lila, that was a lovely gift. I'm sorry I got snappy. Just so much stress with the hosting. We love you. Let's not let a silly book ruin a great night. XOXO. I stared at the screen. She was trying to pave over the crack. She thought she could text her way back to safety. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, Grant is upset. You really embarrassed him. I hope you're happy. I waited. 20 minutes later, you think you're so smart. You have no idea how this works. The trust is ironclad. You can't touch this house. I smiled. There it was. The admission. She wasn't talking about our house anymore. She was talking about legal shields. Another text. If you try to sue us, you will kill your father. Do you want that on your conscience? Stop this now. And finally, one last message, arriving just as the moon broke through the clouds. You have no idea what you are messing with. Little girl, I suggest you stay away. I took a screenshot of the thread. She was right. I didn't know everything about what I was messing with, but I knew enough. I knew that the ironclad trust was funded with stolen money. I knew that the gracious host was a fraud, and I knew that tonight, for the first time in 10 years, my father had reached for a pen instead of a blindfold. I started the car. I wasn't staying away. I was just getting started. The morning after the housewarming party, the silence from my family was loud enough to rattle the windows. Usually, after a big event, the group chats would be buzzing with photos, thank yous, and jokes about who drank too much wine. Today, my phone sat on my desk at work, black and dormant, like a piece of obsidian. I didn't wait for them to break the silence. I had a job to do. At 10 o'clock, Nadia Vance sent the letter. It was a masterpiece of legal passive aggression. It didn't use words like theft or fraud or embezzlement. Instead, it requested a comprehensive accounting of all joint assets to assist with estate planning clarity and tax liability assessment. It asked for the transaction history of the joint savings account going back 7 years. It asked for the trust documents for the Cedar Lark property to ensure the beneficiary's interests were properly recorded. It was polite, it was professional, and it was a declaration of war. By noon, the counterattack began. It didn't come in the form of a legal response. It came as a whisper network campaign designed to scorch the earth under my feet before I could take another step. My cousin Clara was the first to crack. She called me while I was eating a sad salad at my desk. "Lila," she whispered, sounding like she was hiding in a closet. "What is going on?" Marlene called my mom this morning in tears. She said you had a breakdown at the party. "A breakdown?" I asked, stabbing a cherry tomato. She said you started screaming about money during the toast. She said you were waving legal papers around and trying to humiliate Grant. She told Mom she thinks you're unstable, that you're obsessed with the inheritance and you're punishing Grant for being sick because you're jealous of the new house. My hand tightened around the fork. Unstable. It was the oldest weapon in the female arsenal. If a woman asks for accountability, she is difficult. If she demands the truth, she is crazy. I didn't scream. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice level. I gave them a photo album, and I asked Dad to sign a page acknowledging where the down payment came from. "That's not what she's saying," Clara said. "She's saying you're threatening to sue them and put Grant on the street. She says you're having a mental health crisis, and we all need to be gentle with you. But keep our distance until you calm down." I felt a hot, prickly heat rise up my neck. It was the specific, suffocating rage of being misunderstood on purpose. Marlene wasn't just lying, she was isolating me. She was painting a picture where any evidence I brought forward would be dismissed as the ravings of a jealous, mentally ill daughter. "She wants you to think that," I said, "because if you think I'm crazy, you won't look at the bank statements I have." "There are bank statements?" Clara asked. I took a breath. I resisted the urge to vomit all the information onto her at once. Over-explaining was a trauma response. I needed to be surgical. "Clara," I said calmly, Marlene took $18,000 from an account meant for my first home. She used it to buy that house in Briarwood. I have the transfer records. I have the forged signature card. If you want to see them, I will email them to you right now. If not, I understand if you want to stay out of it. There was a long silence on the line. Clara was conflict-averse. She wanted everyone to get along, but she was also an accountant. She respected documentation. Send them, she said quietly. I sent the file to Clara and one other person, my Uncle Bob, Dad's older brother, who had always been skeptical of Marlene's spending habits. I didn't send a rant. I just sent the PDF with a subject line, "For your information." Then I turned my phone face down and went back to work. I felt shaky, like the floor was tilting, but I anchored myself with the one thing Marlene couldn't spin: the math. The math didn't care if I was unstable. The math just was. 2 days later, my father showed up at my apartment. It was 9 at night. Rain was lashing against the glass, turning the city lights into smeared watercolors. When I opened the door, Grant Reed looked like a man who had been hollowed out with a spoon. He was soaked, his gray hair plastered to his forehead, shivering in his windbreaker. "Dad?" I said. "Come in." He walked inside but didn't take off his coat. He stood in the middle of my living room, dripping onto the rug I had bought at a discount store 3 years ago. "She's so angry." "Lila," he said. His voice was a broken rasp. "She's tearing the house apart. She says you're trying to destroy us." I walked into the kitchen and poured him a glass of water. I didn't offer him whiskey. He didn't need a depressant. He needed clarity. "I'm not trying to destroy you. Dad, I'm trying to save what's left of you." He sat heavily on my sofa, putting his head in his hands. The water glass sat untouched on the coffee table. "I signed them," he whispered. "What?" "The papers, the transfers, the authorizations." I sat on the coffee table across from him, forcing him to look at me. "I know you signed some of them, Dad, but did you know what you were signing?" He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. I didn't want to know. He confessed. The words tumbled out of him like stones. "It started years ago. The debt just kept coming. The credit cards, the car payments. I felt like I was drowning in it. Every time I looked at a bill, I felt like less of a man. I couldn't fix it." He took a ragged breath. "And Marlene. She never yelled about the money. She just said, 'Grant, let me handle it. You stress too much. Let me take the burden.' And it felt so good. Lila. It felt like mercy. So when she put a paper in front of me, I just signed it. I didn't read it. I didn't want to see the numbers. And the account with my name on it?" I asked softly. "The inheritance from Mom's dad?" He flinched. "She told me it was family money. She said, 'Lila isn't using it. We need it now. We'll pay it back when the investments pay off.'" "What investments?" "Dad? I don't know," he cried, a sudden burst of anguish. "I don't know. She always talks about investments, trusts, futures. I just wanted to believe her." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you trust her over me? Over yourself?" He looked at the wall, unable to meet my gaze, because she threatened to leave. He said. The room went dead quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "She told me that if I didn't trust her, it meant I didn't love her," he whispered. "She said she couldn't be with a man who treated her like a suspect. She said she would pack her bags and go. And I can't be alone. Lila, I'm sick. I'm old. If she leaves, who takes care of me?" There it was, the raw, ugly heart of it. It wasn't just greed. It was coercion. Marlene had weaponized his fear of abandonment. She had made herself his caretaker and his captor. She had convinced him that the price of his care was his financial blindness. "Dad," I said, reaching out to take his cold hand, "she isn't taking care of you. She is harvesting you. She is stripping the meat off your bones to feed her own lifestyle. And when the money is gone, do you think she'll stay?" He stared at me, tears leaking from his eyes. "She's all I have," he whispered. "No," I said fiercely. You have me. You have always had me. But you have to stop signing things. You have to stop letting her drive. He pulled his hand away, wiping his face. I can't stop the lawsuit. Lila, she's talking to lawyers too. She says she's going to countersue you for harassment. She says she'll make sure you lose your job. Let her try. I said. He stood up, looking small and defeated. He hadn't come here to join my side. He had come here to beg me to surrender because he was too afraid to fight. I have to go back, he said. If I'm gone too long, she gets suspicious. I watched him walk to the door. He looked like a prisoner returning to his cell because he was afraid of the world outside the walls. Dad, I said as he opened the door. He paused. I love you. That's why I'm doing this. He didn't answer. He just stepped out into the rain and closed the door. The next morning, Nadia called me. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the fog of my hangover. An emotional hangover, not a chemical one. I pulled the deed and the full trust instrument for Cedar Lark Holdings. She said, It's worse than we thought. How so? Grant is listed as the primary beneficiary, Nadia said, which sounds good on paper. It's what she tells him to keep him happy. But the trust is irrevocable, and the distribution of assets is entirely at the discretion of the trustee, Randall Pike. I said, Exactly, Randall Pike. And here's the kicker. The trust documents have a bad boy clause. If the beneficiary challenges the trustee's decisions or attempts to remove the trustee, they forfeit their interest in the trust. I felt a cold chill. So, I said, Marlene puts the house in a trust. Randall controls the trust. Dad pays for the house. If Dad complains, Randall cuts him off. If Dad dies, who is the secondary beneficiary? Marlene, Nadia said. And get this. Upon the death of the primary beneficiary, the trust dissolves and assets are distributed immediately to the secondary. I closed my eyes. It was a murder plot without the murder. It was an estate plan designed to wait him out. Marlene and Randall just had to wait for my father's high blood pressure to do its job. And then they would split the house, free and clear. We need to know more about Randall. I said, I'm on it, Nadia replied. But you need to be careful. Lila, these people aren't just greedy, they're organized. I spent my lunch break investigating the Pike Ledger Group. It was a generous name for what appeared to be a storefront operation in a strip mall next to a vape shop. The website was a template full of stock photos of smiling seniors and gold coins. I dug into the consumer complaint boards. The Better Business Bureau listed them as not accredited. There were 3 complaints in the last 5 years. Charged fees for account maintenance that were never disclosed. Refused to release documents to my father's estate attorney. Mr. Pike is very charming until you ask for your money back. Then he disappears. It was a pattern. Small-time grift. Skimming off the top. Marlene hadn't just found a random trustee. She had kept it in the family because she needed someone willing to bend the rules. I decided to poke the bear. I called Randall's office. I didn't use my name. I blocked my number. Pike Ledger. This is Randall. His voice was smooth. Practiced. Hi, Mr. Pike. I was referred to you by a friend. Marlene Reed. She said you're a wizard with difficult family assets. Ah, Marlene. Randall's voice warmed instantly. A wonderful woman. Yes, we do specialize in complex situations. What can I do for you? I'm looking to set up a trust. I said, improvising. My father is getting older, and his new wife is, well, we want to make sure the assets are protected, but we want to make sure the control stays with the right people. I heard the smile in his voice. I understand completely. He purred. You want to make sure the steering wheel is in steady hands. Families do better when one person holds the steering wheel, don't you think? Too many drivers crash the car. The steering wheel. It was the same phrase Marlene had used years ago when she took over the checkbook. I'll just drive for a while. Grant. It was their code. Control. Domination. I have a question. Though, I said, dropping the act slightly, if the primary beneficiary wants to see the books, do you have to show them? There was a pause. The warmth evaporated. Who is this? Randall asked sharply. Just someone interested in how you drive the car. Randall. I said. I hung up. I had rattled him. He would call Marlene immediately. They would circle the wagons. But rattling them was the point. Anxious people made mistakes. Later that afternoon, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I was going through my old work calendars, cross-referencing the date on the forged authorization form. September 14th, 6 years ago. I found it. September 12th to 15th. Supply Chain Summit, Chicago. I opened my archived emails. I found the flight confirmation. I found the hotel receipt. I found a selfie I had taken with a coworker in front of the Bean in Millennium Park. On September 14th, the day I supposedly walked into First National Bank in Harbor Glen and signed a document authorizing Marlene to access my account. I was 800 miles away, eating deep dish pizza. It was impossible for me to have signed that form. The notarization was fraudulent. The signature was a forgery. And now, I had absolute physical proof that could stand up in court. I printed the itinerary. I printed the flight receipt. I put them in the folder. The narrative was dead. They couldn't say I forgot. They couldn't say I agreed. They had committed a crime. Marlene must have sensed the shift in the air. Or maybe Randall had called her in a panic. 2 days later, she asked to meet. Not at the house, not at a restaurant. She came to the parking lot of my office building. I walked out at 5 o'clock to find her leaning against her Mercedes, wearing dark sunglasses and a trench coat. She looked like she was auditioning for a spy movie. Lila, she said as I approached. Marlene, can we talk? Just for a minute? I stopped 10 feet away. I'm listening. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes looked tired. The makeup was thick, trying to hide the strain. I want to end this, she said. All of this fighting, it's killing your father. You started it. Marlene, when you drained my account, I didn't steal it, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. I borrowed it. For us, for the family. And yes, maybe I cut a few corners with the paperwork, but I did it to save us. Do you have any idea how much debt your father was in? Do you have any idea how hard I worked to keep us afloat? By buying a $600,000 house? I asked dryly. That's a strange way to stay afloat. It's an asset. She snapped. It's for our future, and that includes you. Me? I laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Marlene, the trust cuts me out completely. I've read it. She waved a hand dismissively. That's just legalese. Randall wrote it that way for tax purposes. Of course we would take care of you. When Grant passes, the trust dissolves to you. I cut in. And if you pass, it goes to your heirs, not me. She stepped closer. She changed tactics. Her face softened into a look of pleading benevolence. Lila, look, I know you're hurt. I know you felt left out, and I'm willing to make it right. How? I'll forgive you, she said. I stared at her. You'll forgive me? For the scene at the party, she said, nodding magnanimously. For the stress you've caused, for the accusations. I'm willing to put it all behind us. We can be a family again. You can come to Sunday dinner. And the money? I asked. The $18,000? The inheritance? She sighed, as if I were being petty. We can work out a payment plan, $50 a month, whatever we can afford. But you have to drop this lawyer nonsense. You have to apologize to Grant for upsetting him. And you have to tell the family that you were confused, that it was a misunderstanding. I looked at her, standing there in her expensive coat, next to her expensive car, offering me forgiveness for catching her stealing from me. She was offering me crumbs from the loaf she had baked with my own flour. She truly believed she was the hero. She believed that her need for status justified any crime, and that my demand for justice was an act of aggression. I'm not confused. Marlene, I said quietly. She smiled, thinking she had won. Good. Then we can... And I don't want your forgiveness. I continued. I don't want Sunday dinner. I don't want $50 a month. Her smile faltered. I want my money back. All of it. I want the interest it would have earned. And I want my father's name off that trust so he actually owns the home he's paying for. That's impossible, she hissed. The trust is irrevocable. Nothing is irrevocable if it was founded on fraud. I said, her face twisted. The mask dropped completely. You ungrateful little brat. She spat. I took care of your father when you were busy climbing your corporate ladder. I wiped his brow. I managed his mess. You owe me. I owe you nothing. I said, and I'm done talking. I turned to walk away. You can't win, she screamed after me. You're just one lonely girl against a family. No one will believe you. I stopped. I didn't turn around. I'm not lonely. Marlene, I said to the air. I'm patient. I got into my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. She had offered me a way out. She had offered me peace at the price of my dignity, and by refusing it, I had freed myself. I picked up my phone and dialed Nadia. Do it, I said. File the petition? Nadia asked. File it, I said, and attach the flight itinerary. The timeline was perfect. In 2 days, Marlene was hosting a garden club brunch at the new house. She had posted about it all week. Hosting the ladies, so excited to show off the blooms. It was the perfect time for a process server to knock on the door. Let's see how charming she is, I thought, when the sheriff hands her a summons for fraud. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. For the first time in months, the road ahead looked clear. The legal system is not designed for vengeance. It is designed for paper. It moves with the slow, grinding friction of glaciers, indifferent to heartbreak or betrayal. But Nadia Vance knew how to make the glacier move a little faster. We didn't file a lawsuit for emotional distress or familial betrayal. We filed a petition for a temporary injunction and an accounting of assets. It was dry. It was technical. It requested that the court freeze the joint accounts and the trust assets pending a review of irregular transfers and contested authorizations. It wasn't a scream, it was a lock. Because we alleged that funds were actively disappearing, which they were, Nadia managed to get an expedited hearing. It was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, just 3 days after the process server handed Marlene the papers in the middle of her garden brunch. I walked into the county courthouse wearing a charcoal suit that made me feel like armor plating. The hallway smelled of floor wax and anxious sweat. My stomach was doing slow, sickening rolls, but my hands were steady. Nadia walked beside me, carrying a briefcase that contained the dissection of Marlene's life. She is going to be performing, Nadia warned me quietly as we approached the courtroom doors. Do not engage. You are a statue. You are a rock. I nodded. I was a rock. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and windowless, illuminated by humming fluorescent lights. Marlene was already there. She was dressed for the role of the grieving, persecuted matriarch. She wore a soft pastel suit, a modest string of pearls, and she was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Flanking her were 2 women from her brunch circle, the choir, here to witness the martyrdom of Saint Marlene. They glared at me as I walked in, their eyes filled with the righteous indignation of people who have only heard one side of the story. Dad sat next to Marlene. He looked like a ghost. His skin was gray, and he was staring at his hands, which were clasped tightly on the table in front of him. He didn't look up when I sat down. The judge, a woman named Honorable Judge Kincaid, swept in. She had sharp eyes and looked like she had zero patience for family drama. We are here on the matter of Reed versus Reed and Pike, she said, shuffling files. We have a request for an emergency injunction regarding the assets of the Reed Family Trust and associated joint accounts. Ms. Vance, you may proceed. Nadia stood up. She didn't do theatrics. She didn't pace. She simply laid out the timeline. Your Honor, she began, we are not here to dispute the defendant's right to spend marital funds. We are here because $18,000 was removed from a custodial account designated for the plaintiff, utilizing a forged authorization and funneled into a trust controlled by the defendant's brother. We have evidence that this was done to conceal the source of funds from the plaintiff's father. Mr. Grant Reed, Marlene's attorney, a man with a loud tie and a louder voice, jumped up. Objection. This is a domestic dispute. Your Honor, my client had full spousal authority to manage household finances. The plaintiff is simply a disgruntled adult child who is upset she didn't get a payout. Judge Kincaid looked over her glasses. I will hear the evidence. Call your witness. Nadia called the representative from First National Bank. He was a different man than the one I had met. A senior compliance officer named Mr. Davis. He took the stand. Looking bored. Nadia projected an image onto the screen. It was the authorization form. Mr. Davis, Nadia said, can you tell the court when this document was processed? September 14th, 6 years ago. Mr. Davis read, and does the bank require the signatory to be present for such an authorization? Yes, or a notarized signature verified at the time of submission. Nadia clicked a button. A new image appeared. My flight itinerary and the selfie from Chicago. Ms. Reed was in Chicago on September 14th. Nadia said she was physically 800 miles away from the branch where this document was allegedly signed. Mr. Davis, is it bank policy to accept signed forms from people who are not in the state? No, Mr. Davis said, frowning at the screen. That would be a violation of protocol. So either the bank violated protocol or the signature was forged and the notary was, let's say, flexible? Objection! Marlene's lawyer shouted. Speculation! Sustained, the judge said. But she was writing something down. Her eyes flicked to Marlene. Marlene wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the screen, her jaw set so hard I could see the muscle twitching. Nadia moved on. She pulled up the timeline of the transfers. We see a pattern. Nadia said, small transfers. $300, $400, always just enough to avoid triggering a notification to Mr. Reed's primary alert system, and these transfers align perfectly with deposits made into the Cedar Lark Holdings account. She overlaid the two timelines. The withdrawals from Dad's accounts matched the deposits into the trust account, almost to the day. But here's the most interesting part. Nadia said she pulled up a new slide. It was a spreadsheet of deposits made into Marlene's personal account in the week following the housewarming party. The party was held on Saturday. Nadia said, on Monday morning, Mrs. Reed deposited $4,000 in cash and checks into her personal account. The courtroom murmured. We subpoenaed the copies of the checks. Nadia continued. They are from party guests. The memo lines read, housewarming love and for the new nest. Nadia turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defendant had already funded the house purchase using the misappropriated funds from the plaintiff and the family savings. The housewarming party was used to solicit further cash gifts from friends and family under the guise of helping them get settled, when in fact, the house was already bought. She was double-dipping. She used the plaintiff's stolen savings to buy the house, and then used the house to extract more cash from the community. Marlene gasped. It was a loud, theatrical sound. That is a lie. Those were gifts. Judge Kincaid banged her gavel. Mrs. Reed, you will be silent. Marlene's face was flushing a deep, blotchy red. The choir behind her looked uneasy. They had probably given her money. They were doing the math in their heads. Nadia sat down. Mr. Reed, the judge said, please take the stand. Dad stood up. He looked like he might collapse. He walked to the witness box with the gait of a man walking to the gallows. He was sworn in. Mr. Reed, the judge asked gently, were you aware of the Cedar Lark Holdings Trust? Dad looked at Marlene. She was staring at him, her eyes wide and intense, willing him to stick to the script. Protect me. Her eyes screamed, protect us. Dad looked at me. I offered him a small nod. Just the truth. My eyes said, I knew about it, Dad said, his voice barely a whisper. Did you understand it? The judge asked. Did you understand that the trustee, Mr. Pike, had total control over the asset? No, Dad said. Dad. Did you sign the authorization to transfer your daughter's inheritance money to that trust? Dad took a shaky breath. He gripped the railing of the witness box. I signed whatever she gave me, he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and sad. Why? The judge asked. Because I was ashamed. Dad said. His voice cracked. I was in debt. I couldn't handle the bills. I felt like a failure. Marlene. She said she would fix it. She said I just had to trust her. She told me that if I asked questions, it meant I didn't think she was capable. She said... He stopped, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. She said what? Mr. Reed? She said if I didn't trust her, she would leave. Dad whispered. And I didn't want to be alone. So I signed. I signed everything. I didn't read a single page. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even Marlene's lawyer looked down at his shoes. It was a confession of total, pathetic surrender. It was the sound of a man admitting he had sold his dignity for the promise of companionship. Marlene wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at the table, her fingernails digging into the wood. Thank you. Mr. Reed, the judge said softly. You may step down. Marlene's lawyer tried to salvage it. He called Marlene to the stand. Mrs. Reed, he said, trying to sound confident. Did you intend to defraud your husband or stepdaughter? No, Marlene cried. She turned to the judge, her charm offensive kicking into high gear. Your Honor, I love my family. I have kept this family afloat for 10 years. Grant he is not good with money. He gets confused. I moved the funds to protect us, to build a future. That house is for all of us. And the account for Lila? The judge asked. The $18,000? It was family money, Marlene insisted. It was in a joint account. That means it belongs to the family. Lila wasn't using it. She has a good job. She didn't need it. We needed it. So you decided her need was less than yours? The judge asked. Her voice was cool, cutting. I decided to be the executive of this family, Marlene snapped. Her mask slipped. The sweet wife vanished, replaced by the arrogance I knew so well. Someone had to make the hard decisions. Someone had to make sure we didn't look like paupers. So it was about appearances? The judge asked. It's about reputation, Marlene shouted. She was standing up now, leaning over the railing. Do you think I want to live in a rental? Do you think I want my friends to pity us? I did what I had to do, and I would do it again. It is my money. I earned it by putting up with... She stopped. She realized what she was saying. Putting up with him. She looked at Dad. He was staring at her, his face a mask of shock. Marlene stammered. Managing the household. Judge Kincaid stared at her for a long moment. You may step down, Mrs. Reed. The ruling came 20 minutes later. Based on the evidence presented, specifically the proof of unauthorized transfers and the questionable nature of the trust structure, I am granting the temporary injunction. Judge Kincaid ruled, all assets in the Cedar Lark Trust are frozen. All joint accounts are frozen. Mr. Randall Pike is ordered to produce a full accounting of the trust within 48 hours, and I am appointing a third-party conservator to review Mr. Reed's finances. She looked at Marlene. Mrs. Reed, if you attempt to move 1 cent, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Marlene didn't answer. She just glared at the judge. Do you understand? The judge repeated, her voice like a whip crack. Yes, Marlene spat. Court is adjourned. We walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter now. My legs felt like jelly. I leaned against the wall, taking deep gulps of air. Nadia smiled at me. We got it, Lila. The conservator will find everything. She won't be able to hide a receipt for a stick of gum. The doors to the courtroom banged open. Marlene stormed out, her heels clicking like gunfire on the tile. Dad followed her, looking like a sleepwalker. Marlene saw me. She didn't stop. She marched right up to me, invading my personal space. Her perfume smelling sour with sweat. I hope you're happy, she hissed. Her face was twisted, ugly with hate. You destroyed this family. You humiliated your father. And for what? For a little bit of money? I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. She had lost control. The steering wheel had been ripped out of her hands. It wasn't a little bit of money. Marlene. I said, it was my life. You ruined everything, she screamed. Her voice echoed in the hallway. People stopped to look. You ruined it. I stood up straight. I looked her in the eye. You ruined it when you decided my life savings were yours. I said, you ruined it when you forged my name. You ruined it when you made my father believe he was stupid just so you could rob him. I stepped closer to her. I didn't destroy the family. Marlene, I just turned on the lights. She opened her mouth to scream again, but Dad stepped forward. Marlene, he said. She spun around. Shut up. Grant, just shut up. No, Dad said. His voice was quiet, but it was steady. No, I'm going with Lila. Marlene froze. What? I'm going with Lila, Dad repeated. I'm not going back to that house with you. I'm not going to listen to you tell me I'm stupid anymore. He walked over to me. He stood beside me. Marlene stared at us. She looked at her friends, the choir, who were standing by the elevator, looking awkward and embarrassed. She realized she had lost the audience. Fine, she shrieked. Take him. He's a burden anyway. See how you like taking care of a sick old man. She turned and marched toward the elevators, her head held high, clinging to the tatters of her dignity. I watched her go. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. Bean, he said. I know. Dad, I said, let's get some lunch. The aftermath was exactly as messy as I expected. The family shattered. Marlene spun a tale of victimization that was truly impressive in its scope. She told people I had tricked Dad, that I had bribed the judge, that I was an elder abuser. Some people believed her. I lost 2 aunts and a cousin. They blocked me on social media. They sent me nasty texts about honoring thy father and mother. I didn't care. I had the people who mattered. I had Tessa. I had Nadia. And I had Dad. Dad moved into a small apartment near me. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have a trust name. But it was his. We started digging out of the debt. It was slow. The conservator uncovered that Marlene had racked up $40,000 in credit card debt in Dad's name, mostly on clothes and consulting fees paid to her own brother. We had to sell the Briarwood house. The court ordered the trust dissolved. The equity was used to pay back the stolen funds, my $18,000, plus interest, and to pay off Dad's debts. Marlene got nothing. She moved to a different state to live with Randall, leaving behind a trail of burnt bridges. But the most surprising thing happened a week after the trial. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Dr. Celeste Harrow, Marlene's neighbor, the woman who had asked about the trust at the party. I braced myself for a confrontation. I expected her to scold me for ruining the neighborhood vibe. Lila, she said, stopping her cart. Dr. Harrow, I said stiffly. Please, call me Celeste. She looked at me with clear, intelligent eyes. I just wanted to tell you that you were very brave, she said. I blinked. Brave? At the party, she said. And in court. I was there. You know, I sat in the back. I didn't know that. I recognized what she was doing. Celeste said quietly, my ex-husband. He was a lot like Marlene. The charm, the control, the way he made me feel like I couldn't understand simple math. It took me 20 years to get out. She reached out and touched my hand. When you handed her that book, when you forced the truth into the room, it was the most impressive thing I've seen in a long time. You saved your father. Lila, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you, I whispered. I felt a lump in my throat. She smiled and pushed her card away. It was a small moment, but it mattered. It was validation from the outside world that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain. 6 months later, the dust had settled. I was finally closing on my own townhouse. It was small. It needed painting. But it was mine. My name was the only one on the deed. I was packing the last of my boxes when a courier arrived. Lila Reed? Yes. Sign here. He handed me a thick, sealed packet. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Halloway Associates. I opened it. Inside was a letter on heavy, yellowed paper. Dear Ms. Reed, our firm was retained by your late mother, Mrs. Eleanor Reed, 20 years ago. Per her instructions, We were to hold this contingency packet in escrow until one of two conditions was met. 1. You turned 35. 2. A legal judgment was entered regarding the misappropriation of the legacy fund held in the joint account ending in 4421. Since a court order regarding this specific fund was filed last month, the condition has been triggered. My hands started to shake. My mother. She had known, even back then, that Dad was weak with money. She had known that he might remarry someone who wouldn't have my best interests at heart. She had built a fail-safe into the fail-safe. I turned the page. Your mother purchased a small parcel of land in North Creek prior to her death. It was titled solely in her name and placed into a dormant holding company to prevent it from becoming marital property susceptible to your father's debts. She instructed that if the cash inheritance she left you was ever tampered with, you were to be immediately named the sole director of this holding company. The land was undeveloped scrub 20 years ago. Today, North Creek is a rapidly developing commercial zone. The current assessed value of the parcel is $250,000. I sat down on the floor. $250,000. Marlene had fought for crumbs. She had stolen $18,000. She had scraped and clawed and lied for a house she couldn't afford. And all the while, my mother had hidden $250,000 in dirt, protected by a legal shield that only Marlene's greed could unlock. If Marlene had never touched my money, I wouldn't have found out about the land until I was 35, but because she stole from me, because she forced me to go to court and get that judgment, she had triggered the release early. Her theft had literally handed me my fortune. I laughed. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by boxes, and I laughed until I cried. It wasn't a vindictive laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated relief. My mother had been playing the long game from the grave. She had known that eventually I would need a safety net that no one else could touch. I picked up the phone and called Dad. Hey, Dad. Hey, Bean. What's up? You know how you're worried about your retirement? I asked. How you don't know how you're going to afford the new apartment. Yeah? He said, sounding anxious. Don't worry about it, I said. Mom handled it. I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was shining on Harbor Glen. The fog had lifted. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to Lila's story. It was a journey of frustration, strategy, and ultimately, justice. I hope you enjoyed the slow burn of her revenge as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a bustling city like Harbor Glen, or somewhere quiet and rural? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice served cold coming your way. Share your thoughts on Lila's gift to Marlene. Would you have done the same? Until next time, keep your receipts.